The role of policy and regulation in increasing trust in digital health and Medtech.
Hi everybody, hi everyone. Very honored to be here in Malta today to talk about this very interesting topic. So it's a very long one, so I'm gonna just turn down to read it. Role of policy and regulation in increasing trust in digital health and Medtech. So I did not learn it by heart myself because I think you have a lot of keywords in this panel. And I'm very happy today to introduce my colleagues, including myself, to discuss about this topic. Very promising topic where we mix up trust, regulation, digital world. So you will say this is a bit of a fashionable topic, but still, there's still very core questions that we're gonna ask and discuss during this panel. So I will be moderating it with my colleagues coming from around the world here. And let me just introduce first myself. I'm Caroline Petite. I'm based in Zurich. I'm working for Takeda. I'm Swiss by background. I started to study basically sciences and law. And I've been working in the field of pharma for about 20 years. And currently I'm working in a role of regulations and policies at Takeda. I'm global advertising and promotion leader, and I work mainly on marketed products and pipeline products, which means that highly regulated drug. And just a little bit about myself. I started my career in marketing and working very closely with my colleague from regulations and law. And I discovered this very interesting topic across my journey. And I loved it so much that I became a lawyer later. So I'm very happy to be there today with my colleagues. And I will be now handing over the ground to Anna.
Hello. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm a regulatory consultant and a PRRC at Advena Limited, a EU authorized representative based here in Malta. My background is biomedical engineering, and then I have over 5 years of experience as a regulatory consultant. As a consultant, I pretty much help medical device manufacturers that wish to enter the EU market with their regulatory issues. So,
thank you. Thank you very much, Anna. And you from Malta, coming from here, right?
I'm from Italy, and okay. Yes.
But you're based in Malta?
No, actually no.
Okay.
I'm Italian, raised in Italy, then moved to the UK, studied there, started working there, and then I realized that I was missing the sun and warm weather, so I decided to move to Malta.
Very good.
Yeah.
So that will be a very good add-on to our panel, because we will have the vision later. We will see through different questions, through different angles, what you can bring in terms of European view. Thank you. Ken?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kenneth, and I am the founder and director of Specculo Limited, a consulting firm. My background is in biomedical engineering, but I somehow find myself in regulatory space, but that's okay. And I've been doing this for the past 8 years. I've been helping countless manufacturers place their product on the market, get their CE mark, and more recently, their UKCA mark. Just something about myself, I guess, a bit of a fun fact is that I somehow find myself in many arguments about the CE mark and how it should look like, its proportions. And, it's something which, I guess I kind of like doing that, not just with medical devices, but with all other sort of products.
Thank you, Ken. Very interesting. Let's move now to the other part of Europe with Oli.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ollie Smith. I'm an independent consultant helping organizations with strategy, innovation, and applied ethics. I've got about 20 years experience working in healthcare. I work for the UK government running tobacco control and obesity policy. For a good while, I worked for a foundation where I was responsible for spending £100 million on innovation in healthcare, and also worked in the private sector as well. I was the strategy director and head of ethics for Coa Health, a digital mental health startup based in Spain. Now, this tour of the different sectors means that if you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, I actually reached peak trust in myself about 7 years ago when I worked for a foundation. And it's all been downhill since then. So I'm hoping that this panel on trust will help kind of rebuild my personal trust value.
Thank you, Oli. Very interesting and exciting background. And now we are moving directly toward the other side of the Atlantic.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to the US with Mysty.
Yes, I'm Misty Blagg. I'm a second career healthcare attorney, and you could have probably guessed I'm from the U.S. without even having me say so, just from my accent. I'm happy to be here today. I spent my previous career, I was a clinician and then a healthcare fraud investigator. So I always tell people I've lived the full healthcare life cycle. I was a healthcare provider. I investigated healthcare providers, and now I represent healthcare providers. I really enjoy healthcare innovation just because of my science background. I see the future of healthcare and how important it is to incorporate AI and digital health technologies. I prefer to help people on the front end to sort through regulatory compliance and reimbursement issues, but sometimes the first time I meet someone is when there's been a government enforcement action, and then I'm representing them in that capacity.
Thank you very much, Mysty. So you can see in this panel that you have two crazy people that move to the dark side of the sciences.
Come there, we have cookies.
Maybe that's the topic, so let's see. We have a very ambitious question for the first one. We wanted to basically look, since this is the topic of this panel, at what should policymakers be doing to increase trust in digital health. And I'm going to ask to open the floor with Ken.
So yes, very interesting question. I think that being able to trust digital healthcare products sometimes can be a bit challenging for consumers and the users of these products, especially if they're surgeons and they need to rely on this result. So I think that the EU regulations, from that point of view, I think they're a great step forward in ensuring that the design of these the software is, keeps safety in mind. But I do think there is a need for more technical international standards and even, for example, good practice guidelines, which can help in making these products more accurate, more meaningful, being able to provide more meaningful results, and repeatable also. So again, whilst the CE mark is fantastic because you can recognize it and you say, oh, this product is great. But if you could also say, look, we comply with this standard, this very rigid standard, I think that will go, further in making sure that you can actually trust the output of this digital health product.
Thank you very much, Ken, for this very broad overview and for providing this viewpoint from Europe. Let's now look at the other side of Europe once again with Oli.
Geographically in Europe.
Exactly.
But not legally. So now I agree with what Ken's been saying. I think there's another aspect of this that I think is important, and not just in the UK, but I think this is generally important, is that often I see in policymakers there is a tendency to focus too much on the technology. And often in healthcare, the technology is the easy bit. And actually, to get the impact and the improvement and outcomes that you want, you need to think very much about the care pathways. And in my experience working with health systems, and this is true whether it's at national level or a kind of state level or even just sort of an academic medical system as a whole, sometimes they kind of have two approaches. So they're sort of too prescriptive where they shouldn't be, and then they're sort of not prescriptive at all when they should be. So maybe just expand on that briefly. So I think what really can help with a technology and really understanding how to spread that technology is actually thinking about the kind of reimbursement models and kind of the measures of success and the way that the workforce needs to be trained and thought about kind of on a long-term nature. And I don't think policymakers think enough about that. I think that they can do more. But then conversely, where you really want to allow change and difference and experimentation is at the really, really local level where the care pathways are actually happening. So policymakers need to trust that the clinicians, the doctors and nurses and the other health professionals that are actually there at the front line trying to deal with this, they can actually experiment and allow that experimentation and allow things to go wrong and not try and be overly prescriptive there. And I think that's something that they can struggle with. So when I look at, for instance, in the NHS, and I look at the business plan for 2023-24, yeah, there's a sprinkling of money, please use the NHS app, so there's kind of a few things there, but there's not enough on some of those more kind of system regulations in terms of how would we think about reimbursement, how would we think about kind of measuring success. But there's quite a lot of, and we will have this kind of centrally led program to help kind of roll out this and that. I think, I'm really not sure that is the approach. So I think with policymakers, it's about really calibrating your approach to understand where you can have most impact, where you can unlock some of those regulatory barriers and kind of create also the framework that can, the regulatory framework that can really enable innovation. But don't try and do too much, don't try and get in the way.
Thank you very much, Oli. And your conclusion just brings me to a second question that seems to be very controversial at the moment in relation as well to this topic. And we're going to move to the legal side with Mysty. So how can companies prepare for regulation in an area where the legal framework is vague?
You know, and it's such an important question right now because there's a lot of what I say nervousness, and there's nervousness on the investor side, and there's nervousness among physicians and healthcare entities, hospitals that would be incorporating these technologies into their delivery of care. So I think we have to look at first, you know, what do the laws provide? And in the United States, that can be a little difficult, a little tricky, because we have not only federal laws, but state laws, especially in the areas of data privacy. I mean, we're seeing even new biometric laws come about. So we have to isolate those laws, and then we really have to go to the sub-regulatory guidance. And you know, the regulatory agencies will be the first ones to tell you that those are not the rules, but yet when they get into an enforcement action in a hearing, well, those are sort of the rules. So it's important to consider those and look at them, and there's new ones coming about all the time. In fact, the FDA just announced this new digital health committee, which they're going to try to address some of this vagueness. The next, very similar to cybersecurity, we're going to look at industry leaders, thought leaders that are starting to develop these standards. You know, we can all probably think of some of those people that are talking and writing on these topics, because those are usually going to be the first place that we kind of grab a hold to those standards and incorporate them in. And then, of course, look to different jurisdictions. I think the United States definitely did that with the GDPR and, you know, how we were going to develop privacy laws. So I think there's a framework there, but also remember that vagueness has a benefit too, that it really can fuel innovators. I think it's sort of a Goldilocks problem, you know, like you spoke with, is that we need the right amount of regulation, because, you know, if you over-regulate, it stifles innovation. If you under-regulate, then it stifles trust and you can't get uptake in the product.
Thank you, Mysty, and that's a very good conclusion in terms of data privacy and relation between state law, federal law, as well as a comparison to the GDPR that we have in Europe, which enables me to move back to Oli on this point. You made a very good key point summary for the first question, so if you want just to...
I definitely want to pick up on kind of vagueness as a benefit, because I think that's a really nice way of looking at it. I really like that. And so from a UK perspective, as I think about AI and kind of AI regulation is going to kind of roll out through healthcare. So the UK approach to AI is very much, I think what they call it is kind of innovation-led approach, which means they're not going to have specific AI regulation, but the UK will allow its individual regulators to look at this and to regulate AI, which from a healthcare perspective means it's the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority. And I would say they're actually pretty good at engaging with industry. They have quite a good website that allows you to kind of find out the latest guidance, kind of find who to talk to as well, and they also run events. And I found that they've improved quite a lot over the last few years in terms of how they engage with industry. But picking up on this point of vagueness, I think another angle to look at this as well is don't only think about what you need to do with your technology from a regulatory and compliance perspective, think about it from a commercial perspective as well. And think about how you can build trust in your technology so that people can use it as a competitive advantage. Because if you're only focused on regulation, forthcoming regulation or regulation as it is now, you're just going to be doing what everyone else is doing. So when I think about AI, I think very much about ethics, and I think about the need that companies have, or perhaps the opportunity that companies have to set themselves an ethics strategy to really think about what is their position on privacy versus bias versus explainability, be clear on that and build trust. And that means you're going to have to get into engineering and design and all the others, which is hard, but that's the point. That's why that's a competitive advantage.
Thank you very much, Oli, and we will dig a little bit deeper with the last question on this topic of AI ethics, as well as how to develop winning strategy and be a bit aside from the competition. I want to move now to Anna to have this European point of view about this legal framework.
Yes, so definitely. Medical device manufacturers that wish to enter the EU market, they need to comply with the medical device regulations, or as called MDR. The MDR does include all the information and all the, as I said, requirements that you need, that your device needs to have. And but even though a massive amount of work went into compiling the MDR, there are some areas that are not very clear in the MDR, where they are somehow open to interpretation. So that's what happened when then they realized to come up with guidance documents. So every now and then a new guidance document is issued, and the aim is to clarify certain aspects of the MDR that instead they would be a bit, unclear. So one of my advices that every time I tell clients is to keep yourself updated with the regulatory news that are there.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Anna. That was a very good summary. On top of that, you were very efficient in the message, which enables us to move to the last question. We have been talking a lot about improvement, about how to create trust, but let's now move to a positive side and see how we can develop and what are the key elements needed to develop a key winning strategy in the digital health across jurisdiction to reinforce this trust that we have been talking about.
Yeah, so definitely I always suggest to medical device manufacturers to perform a proper risk assessment of your device, and because the higher the risk, the more scrutiny there's going to be before you are able to enter the EU market. So definitely another important point that I always tell clients is to don't leave the regulatory assessment at the end when you are approaching the launch of your device.
Very interesting advice,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
and we will keep that in mind. So, Ken, are you sharing the same view? Should this regulatory assessment be put up front and as a priority?
That's right. I mean, to be fair, similar to points to what Anna was talking about, I think one of the key challenges I see with clients is that they keep the regulatory aspects for the end, which, as we all know, is it's not the best sort of strategy. So my key point here to take home is be prepared at the design stage or even before, taking into account testing requirements, label requirements, these sort of things before it actually becomes before assessment. Another point which is important, especially for startups, is to budget for regulatory assessments. For example, in the EU, a relatively low-risk device going through a notified body assessment, it could even go up to 40,000 starting just for your assessment, and that's just starting off.
Very good point, Ken, about the budget. Very well spotted, because this is a topic that we often set aside in this kind of regulatory question. I would like to now conclude on this question with Mysty to have the US viewpoint. Are you facing similar questions with FDA and in terms of winning strategy with this highly regulated market that is the US?
Yes, I think Ken made a great point that you should always factor, what the regulatory costs are going to be. But I actually want to start out with, my key elements would start with reimbursement, regulatory, data management, and then equity. Reimbursement is now more important than ever, that you can frame what the value proposition of your particular digital health solution is. Who is your endpoint consumer? Are they willing to pay for it? Is it going to create shared savings? And that's how you can bring forth that value proposition. With regulatory, don't assume because you're not regulated by the FDA that you're not regulated. The FTC shocked a whole lot of people with exercising its enforcement power under the health breach notification rule and under unfair and deceptive trade practices. So bear that in mind. And then with data management, you have to figure out how you're going to monetize your data, use it for marketing, and still comply with all the regulatory requirements. And that right there can be challenging, and we're seeing that in the U.S. every day.
Thank you, Mysty, and thank you all for this very good overview. So now you all have in mind how to develop a winning strategy for your next submission. Think about data management, budget, and putting the regulatory assessment up front. That's our closing remarks. And now we would like to open the floor to the audience. If you have some questions about the topic, or if you would like to ask us directly some insight, just feel free to raise your hand and ask your question. Yes, is there a possibility to bring the mic?
Thank you for that very interesting session. My question's really easy. My name's Andy Bleeden from the ECH Alliance. I'd like to know who the panel thinks is getting this right. Who's nailing this? Whether it's a company, organization, who should we be looking to see we should be as good as?
Mysty, you want to take that one?
Who should we be looking at as far as regulatory agencies? Yeah, I think the FDA is turning out a whole lot of great information right now. There's even, they have tons of tools available for, you to sort through. If you're regulated by the FDA or the FTC, they're forming a new digital health committee, as I said. If you think you're an authority in the subject, jump in there, get on the committee. I think they realize there's a lot to sort out here.
Thank you, Mysty. Any other question from the audience?
I would just on that question. I would give a shout out maybe to to Germany. I think that what they're doing on Digger for reimbursement, because I agree with what you're saying on reimbursement, is really important. Because I know that a lot of the regulation happens at the EU level, of course, with EMA, but in terms of getting it into the system, reimbursement's vital, and I think that Digger is a really excellent example of how to do it well.
Thank you very much, Oli. So you know who to watch and which model to apply if you want to be winning in this space. Any other questions, comments? Any other comment from you?
I think just something quick on that. It's just really important to keep up to date, as my colleague was saying, and even follow things like on LinkedIn, like follow people, because there are people with so much time that they're constantly posting stuff on new guidance, and so keep yourself up to date, and you'll have your winning strategy, I guess.
Even the European Commission as well. Like you can find on the website all the information, and yes, you have to look around and do your own research, because sometimes you might find a piece of news and you have to make sure that it's actually, true.
Thank you, Anna, for the closing remark. It was a real pleasure to be with you today in Malta. We hope that you learned a bit more on the topic, and looking forward to chatting with you if you have questions later.